Hey there, tall, small, and in the walls. This is Ray. I'm from the whole series of Tall and Small collection. I don't know if you've read it or not, but uh, yeah, no. Um, Narrans told me that there is some kind of Q&A thing that I'm supposed to help with out with, and like I've got all sorts of questions over here, some conversations that I've had with some of you awesome viewers, and a couple of like generics over here. So I guess we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so the ones over here are more generic. So in case you don't know who I am, yep, my name is Ray. I have two older brothers. Soren, he's the oldest brother, and then Dorian, he's about a year older than me. I also have a little niece. That's right, I am an uncle, even though I'm only just recently turned 14. Well, I'll be 15 soon. Um, but yeah, no, I have a little niece. Her name is Maisie, and she's really sweet. Um, I also, I guess, technically had a sister, well, two sisters-in-law. One of them being Lucy, Soren's first wife. She passed away due to sickness. And then we have Ashlyn, who you guys should be familiar with. She did another one of these like Q&As and stuff like that. So anyway, going over to the other OC Ask questions. Dreams. I have so many different kinds of dreams. One of those being a famous adventurer. Definitely one of those being a famous inventor. Working a little bit on it now with Theo at the moment for our inventions, mostly 3D printing and stuff like that. Favorite memories, too many to count. Favorite inventions, some of these I'll get to later because there are very specific questions about those. So I'll get to those in a minute. Something emotional. Emotional. Losing teeth is emotional, especially for a borrower. Because you hear about that, like the tooth fairy and stuff like that, and like I know it's like one of those like human myth stories, unless it's not. But anyway, like you kind of think about like people losing teeth, and then you start losing your own teeth. So that's my emotional thing for the moment. Neat. Okay, let's get over to the real questions instead of the generics. I think that'll make things go over real smooth. How old are we? So I'm 14. I just had my birthday, so I'm 15 now. Is Hero a similar age to Dorian and me? Yeah, Hero's actually 13, almost 14. His birthday's gonna be next week sometime. And I'm just a little bit older than than he is. Tyron, I think, is 15 going on 16, so he's just about the same as Dorian, although I think Tyron's a little bit older than Dorian. Neat. How would I describe my relationship with Dorian and with Soren? Well, when we were younger, Dorian and I were younger, I kind of imagine like the ferrets from Ice Age. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. I only recently just watched it. They're kind of playful, they're childish, they have this like innocence, a passion, and a zeal for life. So yeah, no, I think that we definitely had this kind of vibe growing up, but like obviously, like things happened and like we kind of changed, we got older. So later, I would say Dorian and I probably grew apart just a little bit, but it's just because of our interests and things were like how things were going, and personally how we were dealing with different things. One of them like being Ashlyn leaving, and then Lucy's passing, Maisie coming along. Just we started developing different interests, and so I like tinkering and like working with my hands, and that's just how I process things. Whereas Dorian goes into his music, he starts writing about it and stuff like that. I think now that we're in our new house, I think we're getting back to those ferrets from Ice Age. but it's just a little bit different. Like we're mature. Ugh, I don't like describing myself as that. Um, old, just older. Maybe not more mature. More mature than when I was like 7. Yeah. As for Soren, he's always, for me at least, I can't speak for Dorian, um, he's always been like a second dad for me, at least. He was just always there, and he never seemed to be afraid of anything, which is what Dorian and I tried to do. We tried to imitate him. We're not as fearless when it comes to certain adventures, um, or at least Dorian is, and I think I'm a little bit more outgoing than he is, but I think that's because I've seen how much Soren has grown, and so I kind of want to make sure that I emulate that because it feels like my way of honoring Soren and all the stuff that he taught me. Um, but yeah, like I said, I don't think we're not as fearless when it comes to certain adventures, but I would say our faith and trust in Soren is definitely absolute. I mean, all he needed to do when we were reunited was to say that we needed to trust him and that he was going to keep us safe. Which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that whole thing, but that's what the whole first segment is about. Because Soren was actually he was injured by a mousetrap. Dorian and I went outside of the walls kind of without his permission. We thought we were helping. And in the mind of a 7 and 8-year-old boy, like going out and like finding food and like trying to help out in that regard, we thought we were doing a good thing, but we didn't. We ended up, well, Soren would say that it wasn't our fault, but I still kind of blame myself for that. Um, but anyway, I'm digressing. I'm digressing. Um, so yeah, Soren was hurt, and we had to leave him behind, and that's how he ended up meeting Ashlyn. And then later, Dorian and I got ourselves into kind of a sticky situation. Well, I did. I fell in a glue trap, and we were all reunited. Ashlyn helped like bring us all back together, and it was terrifying at the time because we didn't really know what Soren was going through at the time, and we didn't really know Ashlyn. We knew like she was a human and that she was really scary. Whoever she was living with at the time was kind of scary, and they both always had these like big shouting matches, which sometimes kept us up. I never told Soren that, but anyway, whenever we were all reunited, like that trust wasn't broken with Soren. That's kind of the main point, I guess, that I was trying to get at. Um, when it comes to like how would I describe my relationship with Soren, like he's the older brother. He's the ultimate older brother. He taught me pretty much everything I know about borrowing and how to invent and how to keep calm in different situations, how to shut parts of my brain down whenever I'm feeling a little bit afraid or a little bit unsure, is like trusting that instinct, and he is the one who kind of helped develop and guide that instinct. Um, so anyway, moving on. Has Ashlyn ever had to comfort me or Dorian or Soren after a nightmare or anything pre or post moving? Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, yes. Early on, when we were still living in the other apartment, Dorian and I had a hard time coping, because our father, Brady, um, he actually ended up passing away. There was a human boy who had actually injured him, um, and like whether he knew what he was doing at the time or not, I don't know, but he ended up hurting my dad to the point where my dad couldn't recover, and so he ended up passing away. Um, and so mostly between Dorian and it was me who struggled just because, um, well, it's because Soren and I have like I would say big caring hearts, but like Dorian like tried to like suffer in silence, but like when something's wrong, at least for me, maybe I get it from mom. Um, but like a little bit harder when it comes to like trying to hide my emotions, how I ended up feeling. We ended up individually coming and talking to Ashlyn independently from between Dorian and I. We ended up talking to her separately about everything that happened and like why did it happen and like that whole experience. And in my opinion, it really helped me get close to Ashlyn because in a way this is gonna sound kind of weird because now technically she's like my sister-in-law. But like from my child's mind, what was going on at the time, because I was 7 at the time, Ashlyn filled that like motherly role, which I guess I'd kind of been missing because at the time our mother had also passed from a sickness, and so it was just the boys. It was just my dad, Soren, Dorian, and myself. And so yeah, she kind of stepped in and had this like extra compassionate side and brought in like a different perspective. I haven't really asked her how she managed to do that, but anyway, it was on one stormy night when I was having a kind of a night terror. I remember it as like vividly as much as I could. It was a blend of like me being caught in my imagination, like filling in the gaps of what happened to my dad, because like at one point, like there was this glue trap and it was just like pulling me like further and further under and I couldn't breathe. And like I was watching all of these like horrible things happen to my dad from this like faceless human. But no, Ashlyn managed to like wake me up and like she brought me to the other room so that I didn't wake up at MAS. And we had a long talk about life and about like why my brain was like filling in these gaps and just talking about that kind of grief. So that really helped. I know for sure Dorian, one instance in particular, he had dozed off watching a movie. Someone was helping me get some things that we forgot back in the walls. Because we didn't know that we were going to have a sleepover. And so we just like all fell asleep. And so Dorian started having a nightmare. And so by the time Soren and I made it back, Ashlyn had just like chalked it up like, oh, it was just a bad dream kind of thing. Dorian never really told me what happened during that dream, but I know for sure that she was kind of like holding him and making sure that he was okay. Post moving, with like Soren and Ashlyn's help, we didn't really have any nightmares later on that we couldn't cope with. And like Lucy came into our lives, and like when Ashlyn left, and Lucy came in, she kind of perpetuated that like Ashlyn role in our lives. So for a little while, though, this was before Lucy and after Ashlyn left, I remember Dorian calling out for Ashlyn, and then he said I had done the same a few times. As for Soren, evidently he apparently did call out. I didn't hear it. But I don't think it was for Ashlyn. I think it was for us. Dorian was the one who heard it. And he told me that Soren was like shouting in his sleep. I'm surprised I didn't hear it. Because Soren can be really loud whenever he wants to be. He's usually not, but he can be loud when he wants. But yeah, he didn't call out for Ashlyn. He called out for us. It's how Ashlyn figured out that Soren could talk and realized in that moment he wasn't some kind of experiment gone wrong and that he was an actual person. So like post her moving, he called out for my brother and I, and then actually whenever he was first caught or like saved, at the time I thought he was captured. We both thought that he was captured and was like going to be treated as a pet by Ashlyn, which obviously isn't the case, but anyway. So that's how Ashlyn figured out that Soren could talk, was he was having apparently some kind of fever dream, and he called out for us, like to run away. He was having some kind of night terror because he was sick and he had been caught and his leg was busted. So anyway, to the next question. These are really good questions so far. I'm barely into this. I'm just jabbering on. I'm sorry. What about favorite movies? Ooh, I like this one. Um, oh, and that's another really good question underneath, but I'll get to that one in a second. So, um, Ashlyn's favorite show is probably Grey's Anatomy or true crime shows. Um, she recently got into renovation channels to help with her career and for our house. Hero and I probably both have How to Train Your Dragon as our favorites. But I'm really interested in like the behind the scenes, like how things are made, and that one show, Mythbusters, yeah, because they go through like all of these cool experiments and how like the world works, and they do it in kind of a fun way. So I really like that show. Dorian recently is a sucker for musicals, so I keep calling him out. I think he's a nerd, but he has really been enjoying all of those recently. He's been practicing uh, in the walls. Like he tries to not practice in the main room. He like tries to like go off like to the basement crawl space so he can really belt out some of the notes. And sometimes I go down there just to listen because he is really good, but also he's a nerd. Another silly question regarding my answer earlier. Have I ever accidentally called Ashlyn mom? Um, it's not a silly question. I have never accidentally called Ashlyn mom. I've definitely regarded her as like a mom-like figure from time to time, but our relationship is a lot of different things. Um, yeah, technically now she's my sister-in-law and she did kind of fill that mom role, but I never that was always reserved like for my mother. That was something that I I'd never called anybody else. Even Lucy, whenever she came in, like she never asked me to call her anything else, even though like she was our sister-in-law. Like Soren was so much older than Dorian and I when we came around that it wasn't like she adopted us. Because even though Soren was kind of like a second dad, it wasn't like Lucy was a second mom. We just called her Lucy. Um, ooh, my first invention. Ooh, this is a good one. That's a really good one. This is gonna sound ridiculous, but it was actually something really simple. It was a tissue dispenser. So as a borrower, I would have like little pieces of facial tissue that myself and my brothers would borrow. And usually it comes in those massive sheets, like one that you could kind of like wrap yourself in, almost like a security blanket, just. And we would ultimately just have like a bag over in the corner of like pieces and parts, and they were all kind of ripped and they would like fray apart because like sometimes they're like made of layers. And so like whenever you like peel the sides apart, then like it's like really thin, so you have two thin pieces. And so after a while I figured out how like the big tissue boxes, like the human tissue boxes, worked, and I figured out how to make my own tissue box for borrowers. I was only 9 at the time when I like came up with the design, and like it wasn't really like I don't know, I didn't at the time know really how tissue boxes worked until um Ashlyn kind of like actually opened up one and like actually showed me. And so I thought it was like the craziest thing ever. It was a technological feat that like I was absolutely mind-numbing. But I ended up figuring out how to be able to fold our own tissues so that whenever we went over to the bag, we could just and it would work like a normal tissue box. What would I like to do if I were human-sized for a day? Would I be nervous to go out of the apartment and I guess outside? Um, ooh, yeah, I like this question. Knowing me, personally, I would feel a little bit weird about going out of the apartment and outside. Um, I'd probably quickly lose the apprehensive feelings though in pursuit of like exploring and experiencing the outside. I'd want to go see the humans that I helped back in the apartment, so I'd probably go back there with Hero and like actually see them and like say hi. Um, I'd also like to go for a run outside in the grass, which would be absolutely insane and like fascinating for me, just because like whenever like you have normal grass, like, you know, humans like walk on the grass all the time, but like I at my tallest so far like barely come up to like Ashlyn's ankle, and so even like cutting grass at like the one of the lowest levels, it still like comes up to my waist. So not having to like wade through the grass, of just like being able to whoosh, walk right over, would be like so cool. Because they also like talk about how cool it feels and like in between your toes. And if I tried to do that right now, I would kind of like a paper cut, like I would accidentally like cut my toes on grass. Um, how did I feel when we left Ashlyn back at the apartment? Oh, this was the first time. Oh, wow. Yeah, okay, so the long and the short of it is that, I mean, I missed her. I missed Ashlyn. After 2 months of training and me, like, how do I say this? Yeah, I just missed her. Um, I understand why Soren, like, said we couldn't go back and see her. I understand why he did the things that he did. And later we ended up, fixing, fixing things to where, like, we could actually interact. Um, but mostly I think Soren was afraid like we would rely too much on Ashlyn if we didn't, like if we stayed, and kind of like play into like the whole like fear of becoming a pet kind of thing, because like that's it's a Soren's whole sense of purpose. Like there needs to be purpose in our lives, and by staying with her, it almost felt like he was going to give that up, because if we needed anything, we could just ask her and she could go get it, instead of us like having to work our brains and be like, okay, we need to go here and here and here and here, and we need to be stealthy and do this, that, and the other to get stuff done. Um, but for a while, yeah, it was probably 2 months after training Dorian and me that, and like regaining his sense of purpose, Soren was afraid he would lose. He realized also that he missed Ashlyn, so he kind of started it. He missed her more than he originally anticipated, and like there was this like gap that could only be filled with her presence. And after us like staying for a while with her, like Dorian and I were feeling that too. So, and like yeah, remember, Ashlyn was kind of there during a significant part of Soren's life, during like this really traumatizing part where he was just kind of left alone, and so they kind of like trauma bonded over that, because I guess she was going through some stuff too. She's never really told me very much about like what happened during that time. um I haven't thought to ask, honestly. So yeah, yeah, I really missed her. um Especially after my a little bit of an embarrassing confession of, or offering rather, whenever I went over and was like, you need to leave Soren alone, like you can take me, like leave Soren alone and you can have me instead. I'll be your pet if you like leave him alone, because I didn't understand at the time. um I didn't understand that she actually didn't make some kind of deal with him. I thought Soren had made some kind of deal with Ashlyn, uh in order to like, you know, keep Dorian and I safe. So after our some of our training, about like 2 months, give or take, apparently Soren actually went back and talked to Ashlyn. Like he was keeping our training pure. Like he wasn't really, like really trying to keep a secret from us Bobbins, um, because he wanted us to not be like, oh well, you're gonna go see her. Like why can't we go see her? So he kind of like kept us separate. And after 3 or 4 visits, like Soren caught Dorian and I actually talking about like how we missed Ashlyn, and like because we had seen her, like we were still like in the apartment complex, so like we could like look down and like see her from time to time, and like she always looked kind of sad, or like she would look up at the trim, where we weren't. It wasn't like we like made eye contact like that or anything, but like she would like look up and she would sigh, and it's like, oh, like she misses us and we'd kind of miss her. So after Soren had gone back like 3 or 4 times for his own personal visits to talk to Ashlyn, and he saw that we missed her, we had a family discussion about where like Soren kind of led it, but Soren emphasized that like we needed to not rely on her, that we could go and visit, but he emphasized that our training was giving us necessary skills to survive, and I'm glad that he did that. Um, but he also determined that us being around Ashlyn wouldn't stop us from being proper borrowers, and he ended up going and like having a massive conversation with her about like how to help, essentially. Um, so yeah, Soren knew Ashlyn wouldn't stop us from training, and initially, like, he laid a bunch of ground rules that she wasn't allowed to help unless she had his permission, so Soren's permission. Um, and eventually, believe it or not, uh, they even ran training simulations. So, like, Soren actually helped train Ashlyn to help train us. Um, so yeah, Ashlyn was supposed to determine whether or not she had spotted us while we were borrowing and like try and catch us at like random points to keep our skills sharp. Um, it was really recently actually, but I asked Soren about it, and he said like from his perspective, it ended up being a better borrowing experience for Dorian and I because we were able to test our skills in a safe, controlled environment, and Soren knew Ashlyn wouldn't hurt us if like she actually caught us, or quote unquote caught us. So it ended up almost being like turned into a game of sorts, and I'm really glad everything like worked out in the end. It was, yeah, Soren and Ashlyn's idea. Initially Soren like wanted to lay the ground rules, and then Ashlyn was like, oh, like what if we do this like training simulation? What if you like show me like if I'm supposed to like look different ways, or if I'm like supposed to like grab or like put things in different areas? Like what if we kind of like make it a training simulator for the boys? Which is something that was like really cool. I like that about her. Um, so anyway, yeah, actually, Soren initially was adamant that this was before he actually went and visited her. He was adamant that we needed to learn how to be proper borrowers before seeing her again. And then whenever they talked, Soren and Ashlyn talked, they had discussions about like how she could help. It's probably, if I'm being honest, it's probably one of the main reasons I was able to react when Lily grabbed me. This is when Hero and I were, when I was trying to get Hero away from Lily the first time before she had like fully captured him. He had like stepped out. It was probably one of the reasons I was able to react, because one of the trainings that we did was like not locking up and freezing if we were grabbed. So I remember it clearly, like the first time whenever Ashlyn did it for us. I was on the counter. I was supposed to get a sugar cube that was out in the middle of the counter, and like I didn't know at the time what that was about. I just knew I had to get it back to like camp. And so as I ran out and grabbed it, Ashlyn had like come up and around the corner, and like, oh my goodness, that was terrifying. Even though I knew it was like a training simulation, but I had grabbed it and I froze, and she ended up like grabbing me by my leg and like dragged me across the counter and held me upside down. And like it was like I knew she wasn't gonna hurt me. It was part of our training, but we did that over and over and over and over again so that I wouldn't lock up. So, and that's like one of the things that really helped. Um, and then later we started incorporating like other weapons that we could use. So like we didn't use real pins or anything. We didn't want to hurt Ashlyn. But we had like little pieces of plastic that we would use to as like pretend weapons to like try and get free. And that's how I was able to, I attribute it rather, to how I was able to get away from Lily, because I remembered, oh, like if I'm grabbed, I need to make sure that I get away, and people, when they experience pain, probably will have a tendency to let go at the unknown. And so that's when I like had my pin and I just stabbed at Lily to get her to get off of me. So that was like one of the many trainings that Ashlyn actually proposed and like ended up doing for us. Okay, so on to the next question. I know what Ray's first invention was, but what would he consider his favorite invention? Ooh, I like that. I like that. Um, Great question. My favorite invention slash most complex one. Hmm. I would have to say it's probably my emergency snag and grab machine. It's definitely one of my more complex inventions, and it's definitely come in use many times. It's based on that one show, Attack on Titan, that Ashlyn ended up showing me. And like she had a conversation with Soren about like how scary it could actually be because like we're actually put in those situations. But I think it was like a good experience to not desensitize myself, but to fully understand like the like what our training was actually for. So like this is like the Titans are kind of like how we see humans like going around like mindlessly like grabbing and snatching and like capturing and killing borrowers, but like seeing that and then knowing how Ashlyn is like you can kind of see the two extremes. But anyway, um it's a great show, even if it scares me just a little bit. I haven't finished it, so no spoilers or anything in comments or whatever it is that you guys want to do. But the 3D gear that they use, I based my design off of their three-dimensional maneuvering gear, the 3D OMG. I have springs in the side that actually launch the grappling hooks, like on either side. And I have little triggers that like help pull it back and fire them. I might not have the same kind of like maneuverability as the gear in the show, but I can definitely catch myself if I'm falling and I can swing to safety. It's actually the device I used when multiple times. So when I went to get Dorian right after Soren and all of us were attacked by those rogue borrowers and like Soren was thrown in the freezer, that was the first time that I had actually used it. I had tested it a couple of times, but that was like actually putting it into practice. And I'm actually surprised because it's only supposed to hold the weight of one of us, and testing in an emergency isn't ideal for me personally. I didn't know if it would hold both of us, but I knew that both of us were going to end up in a really bad situation if I didn't try it out. So in this case, it worked out. It held Dorian and I perfectly and helped get us out of there very quickly, even if we ended up a little bit banged up and bruised. But I think that had something to do with the way that I landed and not the gear itself. It's also what helped get me away from Emil. He was choking me out and I was able to pull the trigger. Like my instinct was like pull the trigger real quick, and it pulled me up to the beams up ahead, since the coil in the back helps like reel you in. I don't have the whole air compression system that like you as humans are able to have. At least not in our size. The closest thing I could come up with would be like an air balloon. But like we don't have any kind of like special air compressor or compression thing. I've been tinkering with gears and durable thread, and it turns out that fishing line isn't great for climbing. But it's great for a lot of my inventions. It's durable, can hold a lot of pressure and weight, and it doesn't weigh very much, at least by comparison. And it's less prone to fraying because it's not actually made of like the string. It's like kind of that see-through like nylon stuff. I will say the main problem with my invention is aiming it because the 3D gear has like little knobs on the handles that help aim the grappling hooks. I only have my hips and a prayer that I'm aiming in the right direction. So like the 3D gear in the show, like you're able to like point up and down and like sideways in a bunch of different directions. I can only aim my hips. So I'm working on that. But anyway, one thing I'd really love, and I think Ashlyn may be doing something for my birthday, is about how to fly consistently, kind of like Iron Face. Iron Man. It's Iron Man, right. He's got the rockers on the bottom of his feet and the hand stabilizers. That is my ultimate goal. Which actually she got me a drone for my birthday. Not like the really big one, but like the little handheld ones. And so, like, that's been so much fun. Um, Going on to the next question, have I been able to fly and have I celebrated my birthday with Ashlyn? Yes, absolutely. Flying is the ultimate dream, and I have actually been able to do stuff like that with the drone. It's a little bit precarious just because of like the weight and the balance. I would like to be able to have like an Iron Man suit to actually be able to fly, which is like my ultimate dream. Instead of like staring up at a bookshelf, like you imagine like you stand like at the bottom and look up, which I guess for you guys would be like looking at a skyscraper. So like you go up to the bottom and you just kind of like crane your neck and look up and imagine that like twice as tall. Um, so instead of being like, oh, I gotta climb all that, you can just whoosh, like all the way up, and I could just jump and soar through the air and make it to the top without having to climb and grunt my way all the way up. I know it's not exactly possible to sustain flight at our height just because like that technology doesn't 100% exist for humans. So if a human can't really do it, then we might have a little bit of trouble as borrowers. Um, but anyway, on that topic, so talking about celebrating my birthday, yes, I have celebrated my birthday with Ashlyn. It wasn't a massive birthday bash when we were young, but it was still amazing. I had a birthday cake, um, and that was just kind of like the middle of the cake, which is personally my favorite. The icing um, on the edges like kind of gets a little bit crunchy, and it's so tasty. We only ever got icing on our birthdays. One of the other questions was like something emotional. This is actually kind of one of them. For birthdays and stuff like that, we only ever got icing for our birthdays. Mom always made sure that we had icing, like for like whatever cookie that we got for our birthdays. This is before Ashlyn came in. And so did Soren. He always made sure we had something nice. You know, he was almost seen once when he was getting me my birthday cake. He never told mom, and he told me never to tell mom, but I guess that's okay to talk about now. I had, yeah, yeah, he was almost seen. This was probably for my fifth birthday. Soren had to go and get the icing because mom wasn't feeling well. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, no, so yeah, Soren was almost seen whenever he darted out and got some of the icing. Apparently the lid was a lot harder to get off. Um and like multiple times the human actually had like come by and saw the lid was like slightly jarred and had like closed it when he'd like almost had it. But he managed to get it. Anyway, more serious question I don't have to answer. Um, Ever since the events where the other bar was attacked, Soren and I have been going into the walls in the community. Um, well, through the course of the story, we're able to talk about it, but uh, yeah, honestly, I wasn't completely thrilled going and talking to the community people anyway. Um, so I have been going back into the walls, or at the time I was going back into the walls, and even now, like with us being in this new house, um, I've been like going in and talking to people, but for the most part, I kind of keep to myself mostly when it comes because I'm like usually inventing. Um, yeah, honestly, yeah, wasn't completely thrilled about going and talking to the community people anyway, so before I wasn't really like going in there unless I needed to like get materials, and even then like I could talk to Ashlyn and she could help me get the stuff that I needed, or I could go borrow it from the other apartments and just avoid the community altogether. Um, the attack kind of solidified my initial impression of them when we first arrived, which sounds bad now because like we're all getting along. Um, but it was almost like a bunch of uppity borrowers trying to pretend to be human without actually like really being human. Like we like to think that we're different than humans and that we wouldn't do anything like humans would do, but the attack kind of proved that we, like humans and borrowers, are basically like copies of each other. At least from my perspective. We have our size differences and different perspectives, sure, but we're all basically the same. I only went into the community to see if I could go make friends my age and ended up being friends with Hero. And he's a great friend, don't get me wrong. But I'm mostly entertained the idea of helping our borrower community to make him happy, which sounds conceited. I know. Let me put it differently. I do like helping people, but the moment their ideas are challenged, they treat you like the flu. Like the whole hose system for the plants upstairs. I got that idea from a movie I watched with Ashlyn. It was a project I worked on with her when we were back at the old apartment. I knew how to do it because of her, and I'd learned from humans. By saying to a borrower that we can learn a lot from humans, they get all tense and withdrawn, like it's a dirty idea. I don't know. I wish we could get along, humans and borrowers. I'm, and I know that that kind of reality can't happen on a large scale, but I wish borrowers were a little more understanding of humans. They have their struggles just like us, but it's like on a different scale. I still want to help the community. I still do help the community with like all of the 3D printing that Theo and I have been able to do. Specifically, like we're able to like make special walls and ramps and like beds, drawer, like pull out drawers, so like we don't have to make things so haphazardly anymore. We can make things to last. We can make things to endure because we're here. We're permanent residents. Usually we have this like nomadic lifestyle, but now we actually have something permanent that we can hang on to, and that just feels really nice. Um, my spiel. Someone had like commented. It sounds like it came from Hero. Uh, and it sounded like my mom was a great person. Yeah, my mom. She really was. She was really a great person. I wish I got to spend more time with her. And aha. Yeah, no, that's what happens when you hang out with people, with friends. They tend to rub off on you. So, I've always had these kinds of thoughts, at least like once I got to know Ashlyn a little bit more. But like talking to Hero, it really helped solidify my perspective how I thought things were. Um, Hero, like the main difference between Hero and I is like Hero at least thinks humans are innately good, which like things have kind of changed for him a little bit recently. I don't want to, tell his side of the story or anything. He wants us all to be able to live together, kind of like I do. Um, I just want to be able to like learn from humans and admit that they have some really good ideas about stuff. Like I know the dangers of being with humans, and Hero does now as well. But eh, people can be really scary, and you can learn from that experience. And it's like humans are a taboo subject, and we can't admit that we got inspiration from humans' design. And Hero will, and I both will like freely admit like we, got ideas from movies or things that we saw that humans did. Um, but that almost feels like it's borrowing too much from being human, if that makes sense. Anyway, moving on. Uh, anything. Would it be okay to ask if you remember anything nice about your mom? What was she like? Yeah, yeah, I don't mind you asking about my mom. I like talking about her. Even if it's like sometimes it gets weird or like tense for me, but whatever. I remember loads about her, but it's like the weird little things. It's been a while, but like I remember a bunch of things about her. Like, um, okay, this might sound weird, but she was convinced that rubbing this weird like smelling stuff, it kind of smelled like mint, but she called it eucalyptus. That's it. Um, she had this stuff, and she would rub it on our feet when we would get coughs. And it was supposed to absorb like through our feet and all sorts of stuff. And like she was convinced, and she every time she did it, I guess it worked because we would wake up in the like without the cough and we would feel better, but it was always like so slimy and gross, and like I wasn't convinced, and it just seemed like a coincidence because we'd be coughing for a while, and then she's like, okay, we're gonna put this on your feet. And then after we'd put it on our feet, then we'd stop coughing. It's like, oh, was the cough like kind of at its end, or was it the weird eucalyptus smelling gel? Um, she also used to like ruffle our hair, kind of like how Soren started to do after she passed away. Um, yeah, he would go over and like he'd ruffle our hair the way that she did, which I don't know if that's something that his dad, Soren's dad, used to do to him, and that was just something that they did together. I don't know a lot about Soren's dad. He doesn't really talk about him very much. Um, but anyway, yeah, ruffles our hair, or yeah, she used to ruffle our hair, and now Soren kind of does it the same way, just kind of keep that going. He's been doing it to Maisie too. She's getting all of these curls, and so he's been messing with her hair a little bit. Mom also had a really great sleepy time voice. Like when she would tell stories at night to help us get to sleep, or when she would sing while tidying up the house. Like it was, you could just listen to her for hours. Um, she had this amazing voice. Soren told us that she would sometimes go outside in secret and sing in the garden so that no one could hear her. I guess she was embarrassed or didn't want anyone else to hear us like singing in the walls. Specifically the humans. And I don't know why she felt embarrassed, or like why she didn't do that more. It's probably where Dorian gets his talent from. Let's see, something else nice. Something else nice. She was completely dedicated to us as a family. Like she would do anything and would have done anything to make sure that we ate and were warm at night. Um, I remember asking her one night when dinner was like really slim. I think it was like the entire week. Like we just didn't have really good borrowings. Like the humans were, I think, maybe on vacation. Like they were just gone, and so there wasn't like a whole lot where we were. So dinner was really slim for like an entire week. Um, yeah. So I remember asking her rather, if she was gonna have any, and she said like she wasn't hungry, and like gave us her portion, her share of dinner. Um, I think it was on day 4 when Soren started doing the same thing. And the only reason I knew about it was because Mom was scolding him at night, like later that night, saying like he shouldn't forgo dinner, and that yeah, like, everything was going to be fine. Like, she was okay. And Soren kind of, I don't want to say snarked back at her, but he kind of like pointed out she shouldn't be like skipping dinner either. He was really worried about her at the time. I know that much. Um, Things got better after that. Because at the time it was mostly Brady or my dad rather, and mom and dad going out and getting stuff, and Soren was like charged with like watching us back at the place. And I don't know if that was like an overprotective thing, just making sure that the kids were staying okay, or if she thought things might be a little bit too tricky for Soren. But right after that, she started letting Soren go out with her and dad. Um, and so like we had like this very like set perimeter, and we weren't allowed to leave that area. And we had to like count as high as we could in order to make sure that like by the time they got back, we would be fine. Um, so yeah, she started letting Soren go out with all of them, and so it was 3 of them going out instead of just like them 2. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, Soren started bringing back a bunch of stuff like shortly after that, and I don't think Mom ever knew how risky he was being. Um, and I don't think Soren knows that I heard him and Mom argue about like her forgoing food that night. Um, they were just looking out for us. We were so young at the time. Anyway, sorry. On to the next. Let's go. Uh, any kind of game or activity that I liked doing with Soren and Dorian back when we were younger, even before we got revealed to Ashlyn. Okay, I like this one too. I like all of these. Sorry, the last question kind of threw me for a loop. Anyway, I've liked all this question, but this one definitely brings back memories. We had a few different games that we would do. Remember, as borrowers, we had to be pretty quiet. So we had to come up with some quieter games that were just as fun as loud games. So one of those was kind of like like charades or heads up, the game that you play on your phone. We had to act out different things and come up with names for it. Another game we came up with was called Muff. So basically, when you're in the walls and you hear like humans talking and stuff, it's all muffled because like you've got like the plaster and the insulation. You got all this stuff like it's like blocking out the sounds. So for Muff, there are two models, or two modes rather, to play the game. One is trying to figure out what the humans are talking about, and the other was muffling our voices using a pillow or our hands and trying to figure out what the other was saying. So usually it was like Soren would usually try and play that like whenever we were hearing like loud sounds, like if humans were shouting. At the time it was Ashlyn and whoever she was living with at the time. Like trying to figure out what it was that they were saying. And then with Grandma Susie, we would go over there from time to time whenever her grandkids would come over, and we would try and figure out what they were saying. And like the same thing was like back at the old house, like there were several different families that like were there, and so we tried to like figure out what they were saying. It was really fun. Another game, and this one we were allowed to do with Soren, or we were only allowed to do with Soren or mom and dad, was people watching. So like Dorian and I, like we could do Muff on our own. We could do this like charades kind of on our own, but the people watching we had to do with Soren or mom and dad. We'd either go up to the roof, like in the gutter, and make up voices and interactions from the kids playing down below. And it was like, it was super risky, but like, you know, you like just peer over the edge and like you're trying like come up with the words. We also like watching the living room and the kitchen to come up with like different lines. We didn't do that one very often. Like we only did that one a few times. Specifically whenever Soren was training us to be like quote unquote like proper borrowers. This is before his accident. This was before his leg was injured. There was also a game that Soren came up with, and it's an identification game. He liked doing this one before he started training us, just because like he liked bringing back little things for us to like figure out, and so he ended up turning it into a game. And so I don't know if you know this, but you humans have a lot of weird like pieces and parts to things when they're broken down, like the clicky pins, the ones that like on the end. Yeah, do you know like they're little gears? Like, do you know what they look like on the inside of those? Because we definitely do. Soren would come back with all sorts of like random stuff, and we had to guess what it belonged to or what it was a piece of. So yeah, like pens was like one of them. Not a tape dispenser. What was it? The whiteout rolls. They actually have like big gears on the inside, and so I had this whole huge thing set up back at our first house where you could actually like turn that, and like I had a whole collection of gears on the wall that was in my room. It was actually Dorian in my room. I had all of these gears like spread out all across the walls, and I could turn one and it would turn all the others, and so that was really cool. Dad had some fun games too, like iced pies, but it was usually Soren playing with us while like mom and dad borrowed. So it's iced pie. What? I spy. I spy? Not iced pies? You didn't try and find iced pies in, like, the fluff in the halls or the drywall etchings? No, but it's a good one. Good try. Shoot! Well, iced pies. Apparently, I Spy and iced pies are two different games, I guess. Thanks. For other activities that we used to do, it was just telling stories around like candlelight. I love a good story. Believe it or not, Soren is actually a really good storyteller. My dad was a good storyteller too, but well, he kind of lost it. I lost that skill after we moved. At least he didn't use it very often after that, and after mom was gone. Shoot, now I'm bringing this down. Okay, on to the next question. Are you a fan of puzzles of any kind, other than the ones your inventions might give you? Uh, as for puzzles, I have never actually tried to put a whole puzzle together. I found pieces and have tried to put those together. And for the kinds of puzzles you're talking about, I don't know if I have the mental ability to actually keep up with something like that. I do like the challenge and puzzles my inventions present, but I would rather do a social game where we're all guessing and all that versus like a solitary game of like trying to put all of these things together. Also, they're so huge. Like, but I can't get a good overview of the picture. It's like being involved in the project and being able to physically take a step back, but I can't take a step back from the pieces that are, let's face it, is kind of as big as I am. Though, I will admit, those video games that Sam plays are really cool. The controllers are a bit far apart for my arms, so it's like a tag team effort between one human versus two borrowers, but they're still loads of fun to watch. And some of those have like puzzles, so I do like those. What would you say your favorite or most memorable borrowing trip was? Well, obviously, my very first borrowing trip with Soren and Dorian has to be on the list. Gosh, there's so many good ones. Another would have to be my first, well, quote unquote, solo mission. I had two of them, actually. One during training that Ashlyn and Soren had come up with. I think she talked a little bit about it, but basically she was hunting for us, well, for me, while we were trying to borrow stuff. It was the first time I beat Dorian in something. Like, I was the first to finish. Dorian ended up getting caught during his round, but I succeeded. My task was to borrow a single kiss from this chocolate bowl. Now, the thing about these were that they were all in different colored wrappers, meaning a change in pattern would be easy to spot. I had to get into the kitchen with squeaky cabinets, get down onto the counter, borrow the chocolate, and then leave through the same squeaky cabinet. The trick is that people notice when the cabinets are a little open, but I went ahead and risked closing it and opening it, leaving my line tethered inside. It was super risky, but I managed it without Ashlyn noticing or hearing me. Then, my first true solo mission was shortly after Ashlyn left for the last time back at the old house. I slipped into the little old lady's apartment because I needed some thread and other things to make some summer clothes and bedding. Basically, I got my first rematch with that cat ever since our first encounter. It was really risky, and I probably shouldn't have done it, but I was so upset with Ashlyn leaving that I wanted something to, I guess, cover up what I was feeling. You know, like some kind of thrill to chase away my sadness. And obviously, I ended up getting it. Yeah, the training definitely came in handy. Someone said that I definitely need to be more careful around the cat. Yeah, more careful. Yeah, sure. I'll be as careful as I can be. Okay, well, I shouldn't lie. Lying is wrong. Let's just say I'm being as careful as a borrower can be, which is borderline always in danger at all times. And yeah, Ashlyn and Soren wanted to account for absolutely every scenario, including things that would fall over and things that would make noise whenever we were doing training and stuff. So like I mean, think about it. If you have a tray of chocolate that has mostly yellow wrappers and only 3 or 4 green ones, like one of the green ones going missing is gonna look suspicious. So like when we were like practicing for like danger levels, we have to go into these situations blind, not knowing like what's going to happen, and we have to practice stuff like this. So it's better for us to like put ourselves in danger in like a controlled environment. That way we know like where to push our boundaries are. And the first time Ashlyn caught me, I remember being so scared because Soren's instructions were for Ashlyn to grab our shirts and lift us up and like away from the counter. And it was meant to scare us, and I'm sad to say it worked, especially on me. We knew she was looking for us, but we had played hide and seek before, so we thought like that was gonna happen, like where she would just find us and like gonna like tap us and like knock us over on the counter. But when it comes to like dangerous situations, like we have to practice for those dangerous situations. So, yeah, she ended up like snatching me up by the back of my shirt, which was like really scary. Even though like I trust her entirely. Yeah, I did have a rough time going near the cat again, talking about the other time, one of my first solo missions. But the only way to get better is to face your fears and to charge forward. That's why Soren and Ashlyn designed the training the way that they did. If you let yourself be scared of everything that ever terrified you for the rest of your life, you won't be able to live, right? At least that's my opinion of it. On to the next question. Morning, little ray of sunshine. Oh, my mom used to call me that. Yeah. Anyway, I was just curious about your borrower life back before you moved in with Ashlyn in the new apartment. I think borrowers would be more nocturnal, considering that's when humans go to sleep the most, and it'd be safest. Or does it kind of depend on the human for you? Sorry, I'm still stuck on the ray of sunshine. Yeah, I haven't heard that in a while. Um, anyway, so you're asking me if I was more nocturnal. Yeah, no, not really. I mean, nighttime is definitely best if you might make a lot of noise, but a glowing hip lamp is going to be really obvious in the dead of night. We have like pretty good eyesight in the dark, but we don't have like night vision or enhanced visibility in the dark. Like we kind of have like slightly different eyes than humans, but like not entirely different. So usually we end up going out of the walls like when the human is busy, like during the day, like when they're at work or when we know they'll be like occupied, which like is more a little bit dangerous. But like an example would be like if it's a solo human and they're like taking a shower or they're eating dinner and watching a movie, um or if they're like doing homework in their room, like at that point you can kind of like maneuver around, and even though it's more dangerous technically, you get to keep like more normal hours instead of just like creeping around at night, because there's nothing worse. That was actually one of our trainings with Ashlyn, was like creeping around at night and practicing low visibility. And you actually have to practice, like you have to like memorize where everything is in the room, because when everything is dark you can't just like turn on your hip lamp, because if the human's awake or if they stir, if they hear something, they're going to see this like blinding light. At least that's what Soren taught me. Do you have any strategies that help calm you down in the moment, or is it just kind of a natural thing, being able to stay in the moment and focused? I've gotten a good skill like Soren otherwise. Yeah. It's definitely not an easy task to put everything in the back of your mind and like stay focused in the moment. Um, for calming down, I don't know. I used to get really nervous, and even now I still get like a bit jittery. I just take a breath and know that I've trained and prepared for this. I make sure I am always thinking a few steps ahead and like just staying focused, kind of like with like the lockup training. I can't think about the little stuff and let it bog me down, because if like one thing goes wrong and that cripples you, that's like the situation like we ran into with Hero, of getting caught, of not having an extra weapon like at your side and not being able to react in that moment. That hurt him, but I was able to like get out because I had had that training, because I had gone through the motions and was like, okay, this is the problem. Here's how I'm gonna fix it. And if that doesn't work, then there's like a procedure. You have to have all of these like things in your head of how to fix things. You just have to clear your mind and take it like one task at a time. You can definitely get in your head. It really happens really fast whenever you're out borrowing, but like with anything, you just have to like, what's the big picture? What am I trying to do? And just focus on the end objective. And ultimately, I mean, like for us, like we have Ashlyn to rely on, but hopefully you have a support system behind you to be like, oh, if like I didn't borrow anything, then maybe like one of my family members did. And that's why you try and get enough, and like sometimes a little bit more, just so that you can be prepared for anything, because anything can happen. Um, Somebody just said, I have such a strong mindset. What I wouldn't give to be a borrower for just a day and see the experience myself, though I don't know if that would be odd to me, a human wanting to be a borrower. For experience and talking about a strong mindset, yeah, I've had a really good teacher. I've had lots of really good teachers. And despite everything that happened, I did learn a lot from my dad too. Like I know he's not Soren's favorite person for obvious reasons. But before we had to move, whenever my dad thought he was seen, um, yeah, sorry, uh, before, like he had a lot of really good advice. It wasn't just Soren who helped train me. At the time, Dad was like teaching us a couple tricks. So even though I'd learned mostly from Soren, I remember my dad's stories and learned from some of his experiences. Mindset is a lot of what helps us as borrowers, honestly. I mean, like, if you live in a world of giants who at any point could, like, easily destroy you and not even mean it, like, that can really mess with your head. And you just have to accept, like, you live in a world of giants, and this is how it is, and this is how you're gonna go about it. Um, Talking about wanting to be a borrower, it does sound like a weird concept to me. I mean, I wouldn't want to be anything than what I am. I get glimpses of what it is like to be a human. Just because like you get to like I get to sit on Ashlyn's shoulder and kind of like look down, and like she tells me about all of the things that she has to do, and like that's a really interesting glimpse. But I don't know if I'd want to like be a human. If like I'm talking about earlier, if I woke up as a human for a day, I'm sure I'd have a good time, but I don't know if I'd change for like longer than being a human. Um, I wouldn't know how to deal with all of the struggles of being a human. You all have jobs and rent and grocery shopping and all sorts of other stuff that you have to deal with. Um, and like this is the same for us. Like we have to worry about how we hold batteries and how we store our goods, because we don't have proper containers and like refrigeration and like the sealable bags, like the vacuum seal bags that help keep everything fresh. Like we have to make sure that we don't borrow too much, and we have to make sure that what we do borrow, we don't attract anything unnecessary like mice and stuff, because if that happens, then we get exterminators, and then that's something else that we have to contend with. It would be fun probably for a day if you were able to be a borrower. It'd be awesome meeting everyone and like not worrying, like, or as being a human, not worrying about like getting stepped on, but like you being borrower, it'd be fun for you to like meet everybody and like see how we climb on things. I hope you're like whoever made this comment, I hope you're not afraid of heights, because that's like 90% of what we do is like balancing on stuff that probably is not meant to be balanced on. Mostly like nails that are like slightly jutted out of the walls, or like strings and stuff. And like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think everyone should try and take a borrower's perspective like every once in a while. But like, if you wanted to be a borrower for a day, you'd have to make sure you set yourself up for success. Like what I was talking about earlier about like having to memorize the room and just like going through the steps. You, if you're not good at climbing, you have to make sure that all of your snacks are like on the ground and that they're open. You'll need tools and everything else. If you don't have tools, you have to know where to find them, or be able to like take a couple of risks and climb. Um, I know once when Soren was like getting us like some practice hooks. This was when we were living in our old house with mom and dad. He went into the craft room, and my mom had the hook. She had Soren's dad's hook at the time, and so Soren didn't have any like hooks or any belaying equipment in order to like get up on top of the desk. So he just like found um I can't even remember what he found. It was like a little piece of like elastic string or something that was like I don't even know what it was for. He didn't go into details, but he like shimmied up the edge of the desk using this string in order to get up on top of the desk to get paper clips for Dorian and I. And like that was super risky, but he's also really good at climbing. So you want to make sure that if you want the true borrower experience, you'll need to like prep everything ahead of time. You think like 5 or 6 steps ahead and can't let that stuff get in your head. You also need to avoid being seen by humans and be ready to sprint into the walls at any given point in time. Like Ashlyn would be fine, but anybody else, like I wouldn't take the risk that Hero took of just hoping that, you know, people would be nice or they'd be freaked out and they'd like leave you alone. Um, Ashlyn told me once about how she was in the city. Like this is talking about like being a borrower, but she like was in the city and she looked up at the top of the buildings and thought that it might be how we see her, like whenever like we're on the ground. The same thing with being on the top of a building and looking down. Like that would be a good measure of like what it's like to be on a human's hand, stuff like that. So like I said, like if you're uneasy with heights and the idea of like falling from them, your experience is not going to be a great one. But like if you just kind of like get that into your head, like right now, like if you just like go and lay on the ground and look up at the ceiling and you're like next to a wall, seeing that huge difference, that gives you an idea of like what we see every day. On another topic, how am I feeling about doing a Q&A? Am I a bit nervous with several humans being able to listen and getting a look into my life? Um, I feel pretty good about it. I mean, since I don't have to like sit in a massive room with everyone's eyes on me answering questions, I feel pretty confident. Um, I'm kind of blown away that so many people are interested in asking me questions, honestly. I mean, like asking me specific questions about my personal topics is like what I'm mostly concerned about, simply because I'm afraid I might get choked up unexpectedly. Like, because I never know, like, you know, some of the questions are like more personal. Um, and since our story is being told by Narrans, I don't see too much of a difference in like someone else telling my story and me answering questions. Um, it's just more focused, if that makes any sense. Instead of like a blanket approach of getting to know about me and my life, and you get to like hone in on stuff. Um, yeah, if I had to be like in front of a panel, in front of everybody, and like ever like looking out into like a sea of people, like so many people, it's just eyes. And then like you've got the lights, like sometimes in one of the shows that we saw recently, like someone was on stage and like the lights were blaring, so you don't actually get to see everyone's features. You just get to see kind of like these blurred images, but you see everybody's eyes out there. It's like if that were happening, I would probably be a little bit more nervous. But here, like I get to be in the house, and just talk. And so I'm feeling pretty confident about that. Not that I don't think I would. Like, if someone asked, I probably would go out and, like, talk to people. Um, as long as they were in the know and, like, it didn't reveal borrower kind or anything like that. Um, if anything, I'm nervous about how many people want to know about my greatest fears if we're, like, talking about me being nervous. Like, I don't know, like, they're not really specific in as borrowers. Like, I have quite a few fears, like, naturally. But like I said before, I'm not gonna let my fear like rule over me. I can have a fear and still face it, if that makes sense. So, feeling good about the Q&A. I'm loving all of these questions. So let's keep going. Random question. How about a day in the life? Ashlyn brought me and the rest outside not too long ago. Has something like that ever happened again? Did I get to go to the movies like she did with Soren? For your random question about going outside, yes, actually, we've been back to the park a couple of times, and I have yet to go to the movies, which is frustrating but understandable. I definitely want to go, but it's a fine line between bringing us and including what everyone wants to see. Like, we do go on like field trips and stuff like that. Like, I don't want to spoil some of the other adventures that we go on, just in case like Narrans wants to tell it. But let's just say, yeah, we've got so many adventures planned on the horizon, and I'm super excited. I'm excited to show Maisie too, because she has yet to experience half of the things that we have, and she's going to probably start her training soon. She's like tiptoe training, or yeah, tiptoe training, which is how quietly you can walk around, because right now she kind of stomps around. She's a little loud. Totally not convinced she's a borrower. How about adventures, as I put it? Sticky situations for adventures. Ooh. Okay, I've got the perfect story for this one. So, I was kind of little growing up, like littler than I am now. Um, anyway, I wanted to practice some climbing outside, and because it was during normal school days and stuff like that for human children, Ashlyn agreed to take Dorian, Soren, and me to the park nearby that was just down the street. This was when we lived at the like the old apartment, where like everything actually happened. It took some convincing, but Soren ultimately said it would be okay. This is like whenever we were still resuming our training, and Ashlyn was like coming up with different training tactics for us with Soren. Anyway, we went to the park, and everything there is absolutely massive. The slides, the monkey bars, the swings, the stairs, everything. And those holes, like, what are they for? Like like on the plastic things with the holes, is that just for like throwing down rainwater, or is that like death traps for borrowers? Because I have no idea. It is terrifying as you're like trying to run around playing hopscotch in between all of the holes. Anyway, everything. I have to say that the slide was probably one of my favorites, and the monkey bars are the most challenging because climbing and getting a line hooked on a slick surface, like, that's really tricky. But the slide was definitely the most fun, just because like everything just feels like lifted as you're like going down. Anyway, I wanted to see if I could do a slow descent down the center of one of the pipes, like all the way down to the ground. There was like an opening down at the bottom, there's an opening down at the top. I don't know if like one of the kids had taken the caps or if that was just designed that way. Anyway, I wanted to see if I could do one of those slow descents down from the top to the bottom. Ashlyn let us watch it recently, but it looked like the Matrix, like one of the Matrix moments where they're like all in the walls and they're all like climbing down. For anybody that hasn't seen that particular scene, you basically have to keep your legs propped out to create tension. So you use your body to descend by like releasing the tension. So like your back is pressed up against one side of the surface and your arms are at your sides, and then your feet are kind of in front. So you kind of have to like wiggle your way down. Anyway, there was a hole at the bottom and a hole at the top, like I was saying, and it was going to be totally safe. And Ashlyn like made sure like she had a flashlight and made sure everything was like fine. even though she had a flashlight, we didn't. Sadly, none of us brought a hip lamp. So it was going to be pitch black except for like the little light down at the bottom of the tunnel. I wasn't going to let myself be scared, and I decided to do it anyway. I was determined. And so, anyway, I was sliding down, or starting to slide, and I made it right about to like the halfway point where there is a very small series of gaps. It's like where the bolts come in or can be put in for other parts of the other parts of the playground. And suddenly, everything is sticky and stringy. I was absolutely terrified at this point because I knew exactly what this was. Like, I felt the stickiness and was like, oh shoot, I know what this is. It was a spider web. The entire bottom part of the tube was one massive spider web, and I didn't weigh enough to make it through all of them. They were so thick down to the bottom, so I was completely stuck. So, with me being stuck, Soren was helping Dorian on the monkey bars climbing, and Ashlyn was the only one who was like there around. Like, was the only one who could help me at the time, because she could hear I was panicking and didn't want to like leave me alone. And like she couldn't get her hand down the pipe because I was too far down, and she couldn't get her hand like up through the bottom, and I could hear scurrying down below. So whatever was there, like whatever spider was there, like definitely felt me struggling and like was coming to investigate. Ashlyn ultimately ended up tearing up the bottom of her shirt and using that as a line to like lower down to me. So she had like torn up the entire bottom of her shirt, ripped it up, and then like went like put it into the top and lowered it down to me. And I was able to like wrap it kind of around my midsection. And then she just like lifted me out. Let's just say it was sticky. Like, it was a sticky web-filled mess, and I definitely was more careful about bringing the right supplies with me and not exploring pipes from then on without like a blade, because I didn't have a blade, I didn't have extra lines, I didn't have anything extra that could have gotten me out of that situation, except for Ashlyn. Spiders are absolutely terrifying. Seeing them up close is particularly terrifying just because like of their pinchers and their like spindly little legs. Horror movies think that they're scary. They have not seen insects up close. Anyway, it's a good thing Ashlyn was there. Minus the incident, it was a great place to hang out, and like she got me all washed up. She had like a water bottle. And so even though it was like cold water, able to like wash everything off, it felt fine. If you've seen Lord of the Rings, it was like that scene where Frodo gets caught by Shelob, that massive spider. And he's like kind of hanging there aloft. That's kind of like what it felt like. It was terrible. Next question. Special stuff. You also recommended Ashlyn teaching you stuff. Yeah. Ashlyn's really good about teaching me stuff. She taught me so much, like, I mean, like Soren did, like my parents did, like mom and dad. But I would have to say learning about different things science related has been the best. Like when it comes to like things that she's taught me, specifically electricity and magnets. She found like different things science related. It was like this big experimental kit. So you can make these like different inventions. So like it has like a battery pack, and then all of the edges are electric. So you snap them into place, and you're able to like turn on lights, and you're able to like make the connection. So that was actually really cool to make all of those inventions. I learned a lot about the polarity of magnets and why batteries worked, and how to like wire things properly without like zapping myself. And soap, I figured out how soap worked because like she found a whole thing about how to make our own, and that was really cool. Another thing, like for Ashlyn teaching me stuff, one of my favorite things that she's taught me about is space, like, and gears. I love gears and space. It's one of the things that definitely helped jumpstart my fascination with inventing. She showed me how like bike chains worked and how like switching gears helped with riding bikes. And then like what really made it fun was the fact that like Ashlyn worked a lot with me and learned with me. So if I had questions for her and she didn't like know how to answer it, or if she didn't know the answer, she'd show me how to like find the answer. So that was one thing, like whenever we were learning, it was fun like learning together. It was one of the best, like some of the best times that I had were Ashlyn like teaching me stuff about the world that I didn't understand, things that Soren couldn't have taught me, that he could like only guess about. Um, it was a great experience. And yeah, her teaching me about space was insane. Like how we feel about the normal world, humans can feel about space. Like, granted, like if I think about it too much, I start feeling like small, it's like smaller than I already am, and like just because it feels like there's almost like a certain amount of futility when it comes to like different things if you let it get in your head of like, oh my goodness, like we're so small in the universe and like it's still growing. Like you have to really have a purpose for like why you're doing the things that you're doing and why you're fighting for things that you are. Oh, sorry, got a little philosophical there. Uh, yeah. She's taught me a lot about bulbs and lights and like the string lights for Christmas trees. She taught me about how like when one of those dies, like how that happens, how to fix it with like the circuit breakers and how that works. I do love me some learning. I wish Dorian learned a bit of that stuff with me, honestly. But I'm glad to spend that one-on-one time with Ashlyn. And besides, like Dorian's too busy like learning how to operate and listen to like music programs at this point. Ashlyn taught us about reading too. It's how Dorian writes down some of his lyrics and how I'm able to like read all these questions and stuff. She taught us how to read. Like I had an idea about like different things and could sing the alphabet song, but there's a difference between like seeing the letters and like reading them. Any books I've read so far that I like? Ooh. I know there are lots of really good books out there. Um, yeah, I know how to read and write. Dorian knows how to read and write. Soren knew a little bit before, and that's how he taught us a little bit. Um, but Ashlyn was able to like fill in the gaps. She was the one who like explained a lot of the rules about spelling and grammar and stuff. Um, I still have to leave like notes for myself. Um, Favorite books so far, like we've read a bunch of them, but recently we've only been reading like kids books. Um, and like things that you hear like a million times. Ashlyn's exposing Maisie to these stories, so that's mostly where we're getting our reading experience from. But that's, yeah, I really like whenever she's like teaching us stuff. That's one of the fun things about Ashlyn. She's not afraid to like go and do things as even if she's like might be bad at it. Do How do you feel about Dorian putting his music career on the internet? And do you have any talents you wish you could share? Ooh, I think it's great. I mean, the fact that he can do what he loves and not be found out by the human race is seriously so cool. Others should hear his music, and if I'm being nice about it, I guess, he's actually really talented. Plus, it keeps him away from me while I'm trying to invent. Um, yeah, technology is so cool. We all need to like be trained in it. It's so great. As for talents I wish I could share with the world, I guess there's a bit of a yes and no. Like I have my inventing, that's what I'm doing with Todd, and we get to share that with the world, but it's not the same since it's under his company name. So I get to share, but I also get my anonymity, so I kind of wish that I could get the kudos for the stuff like that every once in a while. But the project ultimately is its own reward in my opinion. Um, and yeah, like everybody has different talents, but Like, I want the purpose for it to be like me helping people and not like for the accolades. Like, Dorian does music because he likes it, because he's good at it. It's not to get clicks and likes and everything else. How did I find that I had a talent and passion for inventing things? Did I see someone building something and just started messing around with the components lying around? Or, well, I talked about my first invention before, about like the tissue box, and I did that simply because like I thought that was ingenious and it didn't require, like, it was so simple once like I finally put it together. Um, and it started with trying to help Soren. Like, as a borrower, you almost naturally have to be an inventor just because of all the things that you do and all the places that you have to go. You have to figure out, like, for cabinets and stuff like that, you sometimes they have little grippies on the side and you can't always get into them, so you have to come up with an invention to actually like open up special cabinets in order to slip through or keep things open just enough so that you can slip in and out without having to like make a big scene. Um, so yeah, like I said, as a borrower, you almost naturally have to be an inventor. Humans carry groceries from like car things like to the home, right? So imagine like climbing up tiny rails up like five flights of steps without falling while balancing like a heavy backpack and your groceries. Like, you'd want something to help you along so that you can like put your groceries in a bag and just like haul it up. So that would, yeah, this what was it? Necessity is the mother of invention, or need is the mother of invention, something like that. Yeah, so instead of like being able to like make 5 or 6 trips, you have to get everything in all at once, and it just makes sense to invent something to help do that for you. So my passion started with like helping Soren, and then it kept going when I started to try and figure out how things worked around me. So the click pins were like one thing, so figuring out how to like close my eyes and like put all together a lot of the pieces. That was followed shortly after by tape measures in tissue boxes. So like you get the idea, everything kind of progressed from there, of trying to like break things open, figuring out how they're working, why they work, and then trying to do it myself. I've always messed around with stuff like and loved building things, mostly forts. I love building forts, um, using any like extra safety pins or clips in order to like build like these big domes. Always loved building forts and hammocks and stuff, but it quickly evolved once we had more like pieces and parts and tools. And it definitely jump started after Ashlyn was able to like get us more parts and able to like show us how things worked. And I think this is the last question. Wow, breezed through some of these and rambled on the rest of them. Sorry about that. But the last question is, what's it like being held, and do you like it? Ooh, hmm. I honestly haven't thought too much about it. I will say I do like it, but I had to get used to the feeling, if that makes sense. Like, sitting in a chair that sometimes moves or twitches sounds like something out of like a spooky movie. It's also warm, and there's like a thrum of like the person's pulse around you or beneath you most of the time. It's not a crazy powerful like ba boom thing, but if you hold still and focus, it's really easy to pick out. Um, so yeah, I do like it. I like sitting with Ashlyn, and Theo. They're great. As for what it feels like, hmm, trying to find a good equate. Oh, okay, okay. So, your human bed comes in like different sizes, right? So imagine like a king-sized bed that is kind of worn in the middle and it kind of sags just a little bit. And it has a massive like squashy mattress topper with a comforter on top. Um, in this bed, like there are comfy parts like in the middle or by the edge where like the thumb bumps up and curls around. Really great place to rest your head, by the way. But there are also tougher parts like by the knuckles. It kind of feels like the beams under your bed if it's like a kind of a thinner mattress. It can just be a little bit bony, so you want to make sure that you align your back If you like lay back, you just lean your spine kind of like along that if the human's fingers are like splayed out. Um, anyway, it's really nice when you're falling asleep and then whoever's holding you, usually it's Ashlyn for me, readjusts so that you can like still watch the movie or whatever. And when you go from like sitting up to laying down, it's really nice, kind of like a big recliner. I like putting my feet like closer toward her fingers, um, that way, or like it's when it's like sideways, so like her fingers like kind of to my right. That way I can use her thumb kind of like as a prop up pillow, and she can just like rotate her wrist, so it's like easy for me to like sit up or lay down. Naturally, I don't like closed fists. But I will say that being held and dragged into like the sweater arm, um, even though that's like really scary, and we did that for training, I do it because it's funny for Maisie. Um, if that's, yeah, that's like ultimately why I do that. But if that were real, like if it weren't just like for training, and I was actually like getting dragged into a dark tunnel by something that had grabbed my leg, I really don't like that. Um, yeah, nightmare fuel. But otherwise, I do like being held. Shoulder hold or pocket is usually preferred just because I don't have to like talk as loud and I can move around a bit. Um, yeah, pocket hold is usually the best. That way Ashlyn can like keep doing whatever she's doing. Because sometimes, not that she forgets, but like she'll turn around really quick. And if I'm not safety pinned in, I have to kind of emergency like use a hook or something to like grab onto her shirt. She's usually really good about it. It doesn't happen very often, but like the random times that it does, it's a big jump scare. But yeah, hand holds, pocket holds, and then shoulder holds. Which shoulders can be really comfortable if you know like how to do it. But anyway, I think that is the end of all these questions. Thank you guys so much for all of them. Wow, y'all had some really good ones, and more than I expected about my mom. Um, But yep, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or at least like answer like type in everything in the comment section for like my response. But anyway, thank you guys so much for listening, for enjoying all of this. I had a great time doing it, and I guess I'm gonna sign off with cheers, and as always, stay awesome.